Hi, my name is Matt Jarvey. I'm an attorney practicing out of Phoenix, Arizona, and today I have the distinct honor and pleasure of being able to sit down with my father, U.S. District Court Judge John Jarvey. Judge Jarvey has been the Chief Judge of the Southern District of Iowa since 2015. You've been a United States District Court Judge since 2007. Before that, a federal magistrate judge. And we're going to be able to talk about all that during our conversation today. One of the things that happens when a judge plans on retiring is he or she sits down and engages in an oral history. As we sit here today, it's November 29, 2021. Judge Jarvey plans on retiring from judging in March of 2022. And so today this conversation is intended to be an oral history about Judge Jarvey's career. And it's a distinct honor, like I said, to be able, as your son, to sit down and do this with you.
It's my privilege.
My first question is, how many people said no before you asked me to do this?
Yep, you're the first and only choice, Matthew.
I appreciate that, and it's, like I said, a real honor to be able to talk with you about your career.
It's my privilege.
I wanted to start this oral history with a picture, actually, that I have here in front of us. I'll hand it to you, and I'll just ask you, what are we looking at in this picture?
This is a picture of one of the very best days of my entire life. This was my confirmation hearing in September of 2006. I was notified on Friday before Labor Day that I needed to be in Washington, D.C., potentially for a confirmation hearing, although nothing was assured. So I got there on Tuesday, went to the Justice Department for a mock confirmation hearing in the afternoon. At the end of the mock confirmation hearing, they informed me that indeed I would have my confirmation hearing the next morning, and this is a picture of it. It was taken by a very good friend of mine, Matt Novak, who attended, and there in the background as I'm testifying is my father who was present for it.
So I love that your father's in the background of the right-hand side of this picture, looking on as you're testifying in front of the Senate. Did you ever have a chance to talk with him about what being there for him that day meant?
Yes, I did. And the one thing he said is that he had wished that his father, John Jarvey, had been able to attend. But we spent a couple of days touring Washington, D.C. He was in the Navy, so we went to the Navy Memorial and did a lot of wonderful things. So it was very special for that reason as well.
What do you remember about your hearing?
Well, I remember that the day before at the Justice Department that they informed us that Senator Biden, then Senator Biden, now President Biden, would preside at my hearing. He and Senator DeWine from Ohio. And I have a very close friend here from Iowa who always worked for Senator Biden on campaigns, and I called him, David O'Brien. I called him on the phone and said, "Hey, David, I learned that Senator Biden's going to preside at my confirmation hearing." And he said, "Say no more." He hung up. Next morning, I see Senator Biden come out. He makes eye contact with me, walks down off the bench, and says, "Dave O'Brien thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread. You have no problems with me." And then he proceeded to visit with my father and sister and other people that attended with me. It was wonderful.
One of the things I love about this picture is, to me, when I look at it, it represents the coming together of past, present, and future. You have your father looking on, representing your past. You have you, who at the time was a United States magistrate judge, seated at the table, and you're looking ahead to members of the Senate Judiciary Committee who, to me, represent your future as a U.S. District Court judge. And I wanted to start with that picture because it symbolizes all the phases of your career that we're going to be able to talk about here today.
It does.
Let's start with your past, represented by your father in this picture, but let's also talk about your mother as well. What role did your mom and dad have in the trajectory of your career?
I'm incredibly fortunate to have been raised by Bill and Dorothy Jarvey. I have 4 siblings, and the 7 of us in our family were the best family ever, but my father and mother lived their entire life for the children. Everything was for the kids. And so there was never an opportunity a good opportunity for the kids that was passed over. My parents sacrificed for their children, and I'm grateful today. I'm here today because of Bill and Dorothy Jarvey.
As a kid growing up, did you ever think about being in such rarefied air as a Senate hearing chamber?
No, I didn't think about that at all. Probably in grade school, I thought I was going to be a band teacher. And some point or other, that changed. But no, I had no idea about being a lawyer or going to law school, and certainly no idea about being a judge for a long time.
Let's talk a little bit about you growing up. You grew up in Minnesota.
Yep, grew up in Minnetonka, Minnesota. I grew up first 6 years of my life at 48th in Chicago in South Minneapolis, and then in Minnetonka. Went to Hopkins High School, graduated from there. Attended Concordia College in northern Minnesota for 2 years, and then the University of Akron in Ohio for the last 2, where I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Accounting.
We'll talk about all that, but it's my understanding that you had a teacher early on really identify some talent in you.
Mrs. Whitnable in the 4th grade. Mrs. Whitnable was a fine teacher. She cared deeply about all of her students, including me. I've met with her several times since I've become a lawyer. At the end of the 4th grade, my report card says, simply, John is wasting a fine mind. I told my parents later, don't worry about it. I said, I'm just saving it.
Well, that's good. You went on to be a bartender before going to college, is that right?
I worked in country clubs in Minneapolis from when I was 11 years old. I was a caddy, and as a caddy I saw that the busboys looked like they had a better job inside in the cool air conditioning, and so I became a busboy, and then I thought the bar boy had a better job, so I got that one, and then became a bartender, and I was a bartender in a country club for 7 years during college and law school.
And it's my understanding you learned a very important lesson from one of your managers as a bartender.
The bar manager was John Turner, a very ordinary guy in many respects and a very extraordinary guy in others. He would teach me about the bar business and about the importance of the bar to the country club financially as well as otherwise. And one day, when work was a little slow, and he sat down and we talked about other things, and he says, you know, John, great honor comes from serving other people. And it meant very little to an 18-year-old bartender, but it means the world to a 65-year-old retiring judge. Because all we're here on this earth for is to love and to serve other people. And there, early in my life, somebody very important was telling me that great honor, honor, came from serving other people. And it's become an important part of my life ever since.
Tell me a little bit about college. What did you study? What did you go there for?
Went to study economics. It was interesting, but I took an accounting class and I loved it, and I thought, well, what if I don't get into law school? This would be a great, like a trade, like a plumber or electrician. So I got a degree in accounting. Thought ultimately I'd probably combine that with the law and become a tax accountant. That was kind of the goal as I headed off towards law school.
So obviously in college, if you were still thinking about law school at the time, you must have decided at some point before that you wanted to go into law.
I don't remember exactly when it was that I decided I wanted to go to law school. Probably late in high school, but it coalesced while I was in undergraduate school. But I can't remember exactly when I decided. I didn't know a single lawyer when I went to undergraduate school, and I met one while we were living in Ohio, but he was a corporate lawyer, not something that I've never been terribly interested in. So I didn't even know lawyers when I went to law school. It just sounded interesting to me.
Was there anything about your upbringing or experience that you think sort of planted the seed for being a lawyer, given that you didn't have any lawyers in the family?
I can't explain it. I just thought it seemed like a cool idea, and so that's what I decided to do.
So in college, you sort of had the idea of becoming a tax lawyer.
I was going to be a tax lawyer, yeah. That was the idea. I would combine two disciplines that I thought were interesting, and that was the direction I was headed.
And where'd you go to law school?
Went to Drake University here in Des Moines, Iowa.
And how'd you end up here?
I had friends from Concordia College that had told me that they were going to Drake, and so it got my attention. And as I was finishing undergraduate school in Ohio, I applied to the University of Akron. But I was anxious to get back to the Midwest, so I applied to schools in Minnesota and Iowa, and read a lot about Drake, and it very much intrigued me. And one day I just decided Drake it is.
You've told me before that there was a big difference between your first year of law school and your second and third years. What was that about?
I did not do very well my first year of law school. In fact, I was happy to be invited back for the second one. It was different for me. It was unusual. The studying was not like anything I had done before. So I finished the year, and I was working in St. Louis as a financial analyst for a department stores company. It was a great job. It was interesting work. But I sat in a cubicle all summer crunching numbers, all summer long. And it was that summer that I decided that even though I loved the discipline of accounting, that I couldn't figure out how a love of numbers translated into a love of people. And so I decided to go back to law school with quite a different zeal for my studies. And sure enough, I got straight A's after that. It was a real pivotal moment in my life.
When you came back for your second year of law school, a professor took a distinct interest in you.
Professor Dan Power at Drake University, yeah. Professor Power somehow knew that I hadn't done very well the first year, and then saw that I got straight A's. I got the top A in his evidence class, I think. And he called me into his office and he said, you know, John, you need to do a judicial internship. I didn't even know what it was. But I said, okay, I'll think about that. And he asked, where are you going to be this summer? And I said, well, I'd like to be in Minneapolis with my girlfriend, Mary, now my wife. We've been married 40 years now. And so he drove his car up to St. Paul, met the new federal district court judge, Robert Renner, convinced him to hire me as an intern, and off I went to St. Paul. So I start there, and the first day, I walk in the back of the courtroom with Judge Renner. He looked like a judge, you know, he has the steely eyes and the flowing silver hair. And I watched Judge Renner as he worked, and kind of in 24-year-old foolishness, I said to myself, I wonder if I could ever do that. And I didn't give it much thought, just like John Turner and the bartender conversation we had. But I didn't give it much thought, but all I thought was, oh my gosh, I got to be a part of this somehow. And so I decided the law clerks have a good entry job, and so I applied and got one of those. And I saw how the prosecutors tried the most cases in the court, and so I wanted one of those. I wanted to become a United States, assistant United States attorney, and my career went from there.
So it sounds like that internship with Judge Renner was pivotal for you.
Absolutely. I walked in the back of that courtroom and I just thought, this is larger than life. I have to be a part of this somehow.
Do you ever think back and wonder to yourself, what if Professor Power hadn't made that drive from Des Moines, Iowa to Minneapolis?
Yeah, I have no idea what I would have done. I didn't have a plan. These things just were placed in front of me, and fortunately I acted upon them when they were. But no, I have no idea where I'd be today if it weren't for Professor Power and this idea about a judicial internship.
So you graduate from law school. What was the next step?
As I said, I wanted to be a law clerk to a federal judge. And once again, there it is. Professor Power gets in his car and he drives to Sioux City, Iowa to convince his friend, U.S. District Judge Donald O'Brien, to interview me, and told him all about me. So I drove up to Sioux City a couple weeks later, interviewed with Judge O'Brien, and became his law clerk from 1981 to 1983. It was a spectacular experience. Judge O'Brien became like a father to me in the profession anyway. We tried cases every week, civil cases. They were so interesting, and I was so honored that I had something of value for a man of his distinction, and we became very, very close.
Tell me about what you learned from Judge O'Brien.
He's a man of enormous compassion. He cared deeply about every single order he put his signature to. He believed that every case ought to be heard and not decided simply on the papers. And so we had hearings on every single motion because he was so desirous of having the clients come in and see us working soberly and deliberatively on their case. He wanted them to know exactly what we were doing and how hard we were working on it. It was wonderful.
Did clerking for Judge O'Brien make you want to become a judge?
Oh, yes. Just like interning for Judge Renner, I had just nothing but respect for these people and loved it. Didn't really believe it could happen to me, but I was young. I was 25 years old. I didn't really believe it could happen to me, but yeah, I wanted to be a judge. So I leave Judge O'Brien ultimately and correspond with him and he and I wrote letters back to each other. That was back in the days when people wrote letters. And in the upper left-hand corner of the envelope, I would, of course, write my name, and then just as a joke, I would write, Future Magistrate, Northern and Southern Districts of Iowa. It was just a joke. But I think it caused him to see me in a light, well, I wonder what he would be like as a judge.
After Judge O'Brien, you worked for the Department of Justice.
Went to the Department of Justice in the honors program. They hired 6 lawyers to enter the criminal division. The honors program was a wonderful way to enter. You could go visit the different departments within the criminal division of the Department of Justice and wait until you found a home. But you could experience all the different offices until you found where you really wanted to land.
How did you become one of the 6 people hired that year for the Department of Justice?
I was interviewed by Jay Stevens, who was the United States Attorney in the District of Columbia. He was working for the Justice Department and doing these interviews for the honors program. It was one of those typical interviews. He's probably seen way too many young people over the last several days. But suddenly, during that interview, it was determined that his sister had hired Mary, my wife, as a teacher in Akron, Iowa, near Sioux City. And suddenly we had a lot more to talk about. And the interview changed at that point, and it was wonderful. And a couple weeks later, there I am. I'm selected to be in the honors program of the criminal division of the Department of Justice.
Moved out to Washington, D.C.
Moved out to Washington, D.C. Had never even been on the East Coast. And so Mary and I jump in the car, rent a place in Washington, D.C., and off we went.
Tell me about what you did at the Department of Justice.
When I got there, we were each assigned to a particular place. I was assigned to a brand new office. It had little interest to me. It was the asset forfeiture office. But we did some interesting work there. I was anxious to get out. So my next rotation was with the D.C. Superior Court. I tried misdemeanor jury trials in Washington, D.C. for about 5 months. Got incredible experience with jury trials. After that, I was asking where within the Department of Justice they tried the most cases, and it was in the narcotics and dangerous drugs section. I immediately went there and stayed there for the rest of my tenure with the Department of Justice. I loved it. I traveled all across the country, Phoenix, Florida, Philadelphia, Iowa, Indiana, all over, trying drug cases. It was great fun.
Did you develop a specialty?
I did. Early on in my career, they would send you out to places that had some big case where they just needed extra bodies to try the case. And so as a part of that, I tried a 5-ton cocaine case in Phoenix, Arizona. Later, as things progressed, they were looking for us to develop specialties. My friend Michael Zeldin became a specialist in money laundering, and he's now a internationally renowned for his abilities in that area. I developed an interest in prosecuting doctors and pharmacists for pharmaceutical drug diversion. A doctor would have a weight loss clinic, a stress clinic, was nothing more than a front for diverting pharmaceutical drugs. I also did a lot of work in wiretapping, and I found that to be very interesting. But I liked the doctor and pharmacist cases because they had seemingly unlimited resources to defend them, and so you were up against great lawyers, and they were fun cases. I worked with the finest DEA and FBI and IRS agents in the country as a part of my career there. It was great fun.
So during those Department of Justice years, you were in front of magistrates and U.S. District Court judges frequently.
All over the country. I don't know how many district court judges across the country I appeared in front of, but it had to be somewhere between 50 and 100, and never appeared in front of the same judge twice. It was a great experience to become more worldly, to see how other places did things, and to see the good and the bad attributes of the federal judiciary.
Then in 1987, your career takes another pivot.
Yeah, I was expecting my first child, you. We were anxious to get back to the Midwest. It's all we've ever known. We love the East Coast, but we were going to raise our children in the Midwest. So I was looking for jobs in U.S. attorneys' offices in the Midwest, and I get a call from Nelma DeBush, Judge O'Brien's secretary, and she said that the magistrate, now they're called magistrate judge, but back then it was United States Magistrate James Hodges, was retiring. And she said, I wonder if we'll see your application. And they saw it. They saw it the next day. I rocketed that into the mail. You interview in front of a commission of at least 5 lawyers and at least 2 lay people. So I did well in front of the commission. I was one of the 5 names sent to the district court judges to select the magistrate judge. And so in August of 1987, I interviewed with Judges Donald O'Brien and David Hansen in the Northern District of Iowa, and was selected as United States Magistrate for the Northern District of Iowa.
You were how old?
I was 30 when I got the job, and 31 when I was sworn in. I think at the time I was the youngest federal judicial officer in America.
How does someone at 30 or 31 become a federal magistrate judge?
Well, hopefully it was because I had made a name for myself with my integrity, my hard work, my temperament. You'd have to ask them what was appealing about it, but I was sure appreciative.
I have just a couple of the letters of recommendation that were written on your behalf as part of your application to be a United States magistrate back in 1987. I just want to note a couple of them here. There's one here from then Assistant Attorney General William Weld. Mr. Jarvey is regarded in the Justice Department as a superstar, a man to whom we would not hesitate to entrust the most important and sensitive matters handled by the department. One from D.C. Superior Court Judge Henry Kennedy Jr. He said you were keenly observant, determined, public-minded, and as important, demonstrated that you were aware of ethical considerations. There's one here from, at the time, attorney Mark W. Bennett, of course later became a United States District Court judge, Judge Bennett. And at the time, Judge Bennett said Mr. Jarvey shares an indelible commitment to fairness and justice. One final point, also like his predecessor, Mr. Jarvey has an excellent temperament, which is a requisite attribute for the position. And then there's one here from then Dean-elect David Walker of the Drake Law School, who also said John's character, temperament, and personal qualities eminently suit him for this position. I read those, one, because it's fun to see the nice things written about you, but 2, there's a theme there about temperament. What was it that you think existed about your temperament that made you well suited to be a judge?
I smile because I remember days in Philadelphia and in Florida where the judges were incredibly overworked, and sometimes I saw a temperament that I didn't really care for. I got dressed down for things I had not done wrong, but people were so overworked, and it was a different era with federal judges, but it convinced me that if I were ever a judge, that wasn't the kind of judge I was going to be. That I would stay with my game plan, which was to work harder than anybody else, be more prepared. And when you're prepared, things don't surprise you and make you angry like they can otherwise do. The letters, I saved them because, of course, it's an honor, but it's really fun to see where those people went. I mean, these were extraordinary people who I was honored would provide references for me. William Weld became the governor of Massachusetts. In the last presidential election, he was the vice presidential candidate on the Libertarian Party. Henry Kennedy, a Superior Court judge in D.C., who I tried many cases in front of, I bump into him 15 years later because our last names are J and K, and there he is, a United States District Judge for the District of Columbia. Mark Bennett was my trial advocacy professor in 1981. We maintained contact primarily because his wife's family is from the D.C. area, and so we would always get together there, but lo and behold, he becomes the chief United States District Court judge for the Northern District of Iowa. So I'm particularly honored to have been given those kinds of references from those kind of people.
Given your experience appearing in front of judges up until that point, what did you want to bring to the table as a magistrate that you had seen in other people, or maybe that you hadn't seen in other people?
It seemed like the United States magistrates were the boots on the ground workhorses of the judiciary. Not to diminish what everybody else did, but it seemed like they were the people that you went to fix the problem, to get the train back on the tracks. And I had so many good experiences with United States magistrates across the country as I was practicing that it was very alluring to me. And it was a job that you could get in the federal judiciary without having political connections, which I had none.
Tell me about being a magistrate. What did you learn in that role?
In Iowa, the primary case managers are magistrate judges. And so for 20 years, I managed the litigation and learned how critically important that is to litigants. Moving a case from beginning to end and doing it efficiently and doing it fairly is incredibly important work. The judges that try the case, that's what the public sees, and that's fine. But behind the scenes, the judges that move that case along, break log jams, figure out what the right time to whisper in people's ears about alternative dispute resolution, that is an incredibly important function, and I learned so much about managing litigation and doing it in a way that advanced the litigation. I also tried a lot of cases as a magistrate judge, and that was a lot of fun too.
You gained some experience in alternative dispute resolution.
I never met an innovation I didn't like, and so there was a point at which summary jury trials became a new thing, a fun thing to do, a one-day, non-binding jury trial where all the evidence, or most of it, was summarized by lawyers. It gave the parties a real look in one day as to what a jury might do with their case, and I loved doing them. Then in Iowa, probably the biggest sea change in terms of something associated with the civil side of the business was the advent of mediation. And so I quickly had this stable of cases that were ripe for mediation, and I did probably over 400 of them, and I loved it. I loved that it was rewarding work, putting people's problems to an end that day, and at the end of one day, their problems went away forever, or that problem went away forever, and how rewarding it was, and how many people thank you at the end of a mediation and say things, whether it's true or not, things like, this never would have got done except for your participation. Um, there were some of the most rewarding days of my career, and actually it's what's interests me about retirement. I'm heading back there to those days that I found so rewarding.
You become a district judge in 2007 after almost 20 years as a magistrate judge.
Right. The first district judgeship I applied for was, I believe, 1991, that Ronald Longstaff got in Des Moines. I applied for the one that Mark Bennett got. I'm sure I applied for the one that Jim Gritzner got. I applied for quite a few of them. And of course I was young. And then in 2006, this position came open when Judge Longstaff retired. And I applied at the very last minute. It was a usual set of circumstances. I applied at the last minute and got the job. I'd gotten to the point where I thought I was never going to get this, and one day it happened for me.
What was the biggest difference going from a magistrate judge to a U.S. District Court judge?
You're trying criminal cases. That's the biggest change. I had tried quite a few civil cases as a magistrate judge, including patent cases, very complex commercial cases, lots of employment discrimination cases, but they were all civil. So I returned to my experience on the criminal side of the business when I returned. And then, of course, sentencing. A magistrate judge can sentence for misdemeanors, but not for felonies. And so it was the criminal trials and the felony sentencings that became different.
You've been a U.S. District Court judge and now the Chief Judge of the Southern District of Iowa ever since 2007.
Yeah.
During that time, you also had the opportunity to travel to other districts, right?
Right. It was very, very interesting work. I always tell people, I wasn't put on this earth to do as little as possible. I want to do as much. And so we have what's called the Inter-Circuit Assignment Committee, which is a broker between districts that need help and districts that can give help. Well, when I'm current with my work, I was very, very happy to volunteer in other places in the country. I've volunteered and worked in Connecticut, in Florida, in Alabama, New Mexico, Arizona, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, maybe other places. But it's incredibly interesting work. Again, like when I travel the country as a prosecutor, you become more worldly when you see how other people do things. You see that some people are doing things better than you and you learn from them. Once in a while you show them something that maybe you're doing and they learn from that. But that cross-pollination of judges is a wonderful idea. And I learned about things that I could never learn about in Iowa, like the immigration equation on the border. I worked a lot in Tucson and in Las Cruces, and I learned so much about the immigration equation. I always say, I don't care if you're liberal or conservative or how you feel about it. You really need to be down there and you need to see it to formulate good opinions about it. And that's the kind of things that happen to me when I traveled to other districts.
When you look back over sort of the arc of your career, from where you started to where you ended up, how much of that do you think is a product of taking advantage of where the stream of life is taking you, and how much of it do you think is you sort of actively paddling your boat to particular places along the way?
Good question. As it relates to my career path, it was completely the current. Yeah, I started out to be a tax lawyer, and I just took things that fell in my path, and that's why I've always believed that I've been watched over because of it. Because there was all these wonderful things that kept being sequentially laid in my path, and all I did was ride the current and take them. Now, once I got them, it was all paddling. I believe that I'll be the hardest worker that there is. Like I said, I'm not here to do the least amount of work. I'm here to do the most that I can do. And so it was hard work after that.
When you look back, do you see any moments in your life that maybe at the time seemed innocuous but turned out to be very meaningful?
Yes. There's actually a lot of them, but one that stands out is your younger brothers, twins, Andrew and Michael, played soccer as little kids, and we'd be in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where we lived, and it'd be cold mornings, and I'd be out there next to the other moms and dads watching the soccer kids, and there was this guy that he and I gravitated towards each other, I guess because we're lawyers, and we became friends. Only saw each other in the soccer field. One day, years later, he was in a dispute with his law partner. No fault of his own, but it was a significant dispute. It got some public attention. It wasn't a good thing for anyone. It needed to be put to bed, and I suggested that we mediate this dispute. After a couple of days of difficult work, we got it done. I didn't realize it, but this guy was probably Senator Grassley's most trusted aide ever. And I didn't realize that after that, all of a sudden my name is being bandied about in Washington, D.C. as a potential United States District Judge candidate.
It's strange how life works in that kind of way.
Very strange. Nothing that anybody ever planned. It just happened, but it turned out to be a wonderful thing. For a guy who never gave a nickel to the Republican Party and never worked for them for a minute, here it is. My name is being mentioned at the highest circles in Washington, D.C.
I want to talk for a little bit about trends that you've seen over the course of your career. How has the landscape of the types of cases you saw, both in the civil and criminal context, changed from when you started to now?
It's changed enormously. On the civil side, if you were a lawyer, for example, in the 1960s, and I wasn't, I graduated from law school in 1981, but if you were a lawyer in the 60s in the civil practice, you were trying automobile accidents. By the time I became a judge, automobile accidents were rarely tried. Insurance companies have learned to settle those even before they're filed. I've tried a few over the years. But instead of automobile accidents, the personal injury cases became products liability cases. During my tenure, the Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted by Congress, and so that, together with the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that was starting to get energized in the late 80s and early 90s, we saw a trend towards the employment relationship and employment discrimination litigation and the like. On the criminal side, we rarely tried cases. The 2 years I was with Judge O'Brien, we tried one short criminal trial. Now criminal trials have become by far the most predominant trials that we have. I'll probably try 3 civil cases in a year and probably try 16 criminal cases. So the shift from trying civil cases to criminal cases is a big trend. And then the significance of the criminal cases. In the old days, the crime of being a felon in possession of a firearm, for example, was a guy with a 3-year-old drug conviction driving down the road, stopped for a traffic violation, and the police see the butt of a gun under the car. Today, in my court, a felon in possession is almost every single time it's a shooting. Much more significant criminal activity. I don't remember ever seeing human trafficking cases 20, 30 years ago. Now I always have human trafficking cases on my docket, and they're horrible. And they're horrible, the kinds of things that you just don't believe would happen in Iowa. So the criminal cases, the defendants have become much more sophisticated because of more exposure to criminal courts, much more manipulative of the system, much more difficult than they used to be.
To what do you attribute the increase in trying criminal cases versus the decrease in trying civil cases over time?
In 1987, we got the sentencing guidelines, which changed sentencing dramatically. Before, a drug crime would just simply have anywhere from 0 to 20 years, and the judge got to pick the sentence. Now, under the sentencing guidelines, it's a fairly sophisticated and complex approach to determining a range of imprisonment that the Sentencing Commission recommends for a particular sentence. But they're high enough and they're intended to be an anchor for the judge's decision that's increased the number of criminal trials. Also, the advent of mandatory minimum sentences. Congress keeps increasing the number of crimes that have mandatory minimum sentences. And so somebody's looking at a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years, they think that's the rest of their life, they might as well go to trial. So I think it's the punishment in federal court that has increased the desire for people to go to trial.
And the decrease in civil trials, I assume, has something to do with how expensive it is.
We've created the fairest system in the world, and nobody can afford to use it. Unquestionably, the expense of civil trials has decreased their prevalence. I talk to my friends who bring personal injury cases and defend them, and neither of them can go to trial on a $40,000 case. It's just too expensive. I think about $40,000 to me, that would be a lot of justice. And my plaintiff's personal injury lawyer friends can't afford to bring them, and my defense personal injury friends can't afford to, with their clients can't afford to try them. It's terrible. It's a terrible situation.
How has technology changed over the course of your career, both in terms of being a judge and in terms of how cases are tried?
Think of it. We didn't even have cellular telephones when I started. We didn't have personal computers. Personal computers arrived in our office about 1991. We looked at them. We didn't know what we were going to do with them even. But with electronic filing, it changed dramatically the speed at which things were processed within a court. In trial, tremendously different. The way we display things in trial, the way we display evidence, the way a criminal trial looks is dramatically different than 20 years ago. In every criminal trial I have now, there's two things you see. You see body cams from police officers and with excellent clarity showing the events, and two, you see the analysis of cellular telephones from the defendant and the combination of those things, or their posts on social media sites make the trial much, much different than they looked 20 years ago. Much shorter, and the kinds of things that are pretty difficult to cross-examine. Body cam footage or cellular telephone records.
Has lawyering gotten better or worse over time?
I think it is. In federal court, the quality of lawyering has always been high, and it'll always be high. The one thing that we're concerned about is the lack of civil trials means that where are the young people going to get experience trying civil cases now? Like I said, in the 1960s, when people were trying automobile accidents, or in the early 1980s when I worked for Judge O'Brien, we were trying civil cases every week, and people got experience from that and learned to be good at it. We're all concerned that the lack of civil trials will mean that this new generation of civil trial lawyers just simply won't have the experience that their predecessors had.
Tell me a little bit about some of the best days on the job.
I claim that I've never had a bad day at work. And when you get what you want out of life, that's how it ought to be. Every day that justice is delivered is a really good day to go to the office. And so that's why every day is a good day at work. There are some days that are even better. I think that when you can deliver justice for people efficiently and quick, speed isn't the goal, but it's wonderful when it happens. Early in my career, we used to do what we call tutorials in federal court in Cedar Rapids. We would have the parties come in and explain difficult technology to us, like in a patent case. And I remember one day that they came in to explain some difficult technology and then talk about the patent claims that would be needed to be resolved. And there was just something odd about the parties that day. And so afterwards, right after this, what we called it a tutorial, I took him aside and I said, is there any chance that you'd consider early mediation for this case, that you could consider settling it? Well, I separated the parties, talked to them for a few minutes. It turned out that the manufacturer of this case, in this case, was being disparaged in the industry for their treatment of the plaintiff, the inventor of this product. And I immediately went into a couple sessions of mediation with him, and 3 hours later, that man, the plaintiff, took out enough money from that mediation that he would never have to work again. And it was just the fact that I asked that question on that day of people who turns out were very receptive to resolving their case that caused us to deliver justice to that inventor and to the manufacturer in hours that could have taken years. That's a good day at work.
Any other examples?
Sure. Another example of that would be there was a huge labor dispute in Muscatine, Iowa, years ago. It was a lockout, and the governor of Iowa was getting political pressure, I think, to intervene and get this labor dispute resolved. But of course, labor disputes are largely preempted by the National Labor Relations Act. It's a federal matter, and the states have little ability. But using an arcane statute, the governor of the state of Iowa decided to intervene in this labor dispute to try and get it resolved. So they sued the governor, and the company sued the governor, and I found myself in a temporary restraining order hearing 20 days later. But we looked at the problem in advance, and I convinced the parties it wasn't a temporary restraining order. We were ready that day to resolve the case finally. Turns out I ended up enjoining the governor from participating in that labor dispute. The governor did not appeal the decision, and it was over in like 20 days. And those kinds of days are particularly satisfying to me when you can resolve something that quickly and so finally.
As a judge, how did you balance that desire to resolve things quickly and efficiently against the obvious need for fairness?
Right. So at every stage of the way, I've always said, that the goal is fairness, that it's not speed, it's fairness. But that said, our rules, for example, of civil procedure, Rule 1 says that the rules are to be interpreted so as to promote the efficient administration of justice.
It's a little strange to think of trying criminal cases or sentencing as being a good day, but on the criminal side of things, what would a good day look like for you?
98% of criminal defendants plead guilty. We need to find out which ones really want a trial and which ones are going to plead guilty. And having the knowledge of the criminal docket to know when to push and when to hold back so that we can figure out who's going to plead guilty and who's going to go to trial. That's important work of a district judge, and I was assisted by my years as a magistrate judge in doing that. One of the things that you see is that people in local county jails get very little programming. They don't get drug treatment, they don't get mental health treatment, or if they do, it's very superficial. And so if somebody's going to serve 3 years in prison, we don't want them to do 2 years in the county jail here waiting for a trial. Rather, we'd like to figure it out sooner and get the people who admit that they're guilty off to a federal prison where they can get the kind of program that they simply can't get elsewhere. And we have some of the finest drug treatment, we have some of the finest vocational training, we have some of the finest rehabilitative programs in the world in our federal prisons. People don't know that, but it's a good day to figure out who wants a trial and who wants to plead guilty, and for those who want to plead guilty, to move them out of a jail and onto something that's more rehabilitative.
And I assume seeing, for example, a victim of a crime be vindicated is also a good day at the office.
The victims have a particular impact on me, and when they come to court, the rights that they have to speak are incredibly important. And yes, seeing victims, whether it's victims of a financial crime, victims of a sex crime, seeing them vindicated, seeing, for example, a prostitute who's been beaten horribly by a pimp have her day in court and finally stand up to the man that beat her for a great period of time is that's a good day in court to see that happen, to see that vindication.
What are some challenges that have arisen in the federal judiciary over the course of your career, and how have they been dealt with?
Well, the biggest challenge lately is the pandemic. It was very frightening. We had poor quality of information. We have a constitution that is not suspended during times of war or during times of pandemic, so we have to move on, and yet we can't put the public in danger by having them all assemble like they used to. And so we had to learn to try cases in a completely different way. I just insisted that we get back to trying cases after about a 4 or 5 month shutdown of our system. But in August of 2020, I started trying cases, and I tried 16 of them during the pandemic, and I just learned from it. First of all, that everything's going to look different. We're never going to sit shoulder to shoulder with people ever again, and so maybe half of the jury selection had to take place in the morning using the gallery of the court rather than a jury box. Maybe the jurors would not sit in the jury box anymore. They'd sit wherever they could to be socially distanced. They wouldn't have breaks in small jury rooms. They wouldn't deliberate in small rooms. They would deliberate in the courtroom with all of us, of course, gone. And then at the end of the trials, I would send out elaborate surveys to make sure the jurors thought that they were being fairly treated and being kept safe during the pandemic. And so we just had to innovate, we had to learn, but we did it. We can't think of a single person that contracted the coronavirus during our conduct of 16 jury trials over the course of a year. It kept the system operable and kept the public safe. And we're very proud of that.
How do you think that a career as a judge has affected your outlook on life?
Yeah, a couple ways. On the negative side, you see things that you wish you never had to see. I've got images, unfortunately, of child pornography in my mind that I can't get out because you have to view this stuff in the course of trials, and it's so insidious you can't believe it, and you can't forget it. So there's a certain loss of innocence that comes as a part of the territory. That's a significant price to pay for getting this job. One thing that you see when you're a judge for a long time is two things about the human condition. First, the fragility of the human condition, how fragile we are. Fortunately, though, we see the resilience of the human condition too, just how resilient we are. And so there's the good and the bad of that you see, and it's unmistakable if you're a judge.
Let's shift gears for just a moment and talk about mentoring. We've talked throughout this interview about mentors that you've had. What has the role of mentors been in the arc of your career progression, and how have you approached mentoring as a judge?
Yeah. It is so important to have great mentors, and I've been so fortunate in my lifetime to have people like Mrs. Whitnable, to have Dan Power, to have Donald O'Brien, and to have all my other colleagues. There's too many of them to mention. I wouldn't want to start mentioning them for fear of leaving someone out, but to have those kind of people in your life that you can draw from is just amazing. As a parent, you're always so happy when some other adult takes interest in your children, and I've experienced that with my kids. And so it between your own experiences and the experiences of your children, it highlights the importance of being a mentor. Once you have the experience, once you have the resources, whatever it is that you've gained throughout the course of your career, it's great to use them for yourself. It's equally or more important to use them to help others.
And how have you approached that in your own career?
So in my career, the kinds of people that I've been fortunate to mentor are my law clerks, and the law clerks become like children, although some of them have been older than me.
Okay.
So the mentoring of law clerks to make sure that they're on a path where they want to go, and to show them that path, or to show them the next step in that path. It's simple. It doesn't take much time, but it's incredibly important. You don't have to do as much as Dan Power did for me in order to advance someone else's career. And when you can have that kind of impact on other people's lives, it's, again, incredibly rewarding.
And you've enjoyed teaching too.
I started teaching trial advocacy in 1993 at the University of Iowa Law School. And I did it just kind of on a whim. I just thought I'd try it once. But immediately I found that I had something that the students found valuable, and that was incredibly important to me because I was just teaching the practical class, trial advocacy, how to try cases in the law school, and the kids naturally gravitate to someone who they knows what they're talking about. And it's amazing to see how far you can take a class in the intersession there, where we teach it 40 hours straight, from Sunday afternoon to Friday. I've loved doing that, and I've found so many students that I've been able to help, whether it would be hiring them as a law clerk or serving as a reference, or just sitting down with them and helping them figure out what the next step is on their path. I love teaching at the law school.
Let's talk real quick about new courthouse projects. You've been fortunate to work on several. What are they, and how did they impact your career?
You would never expect as a judge that you'd get into the business of building federal courthouses, but there I was as early as 1992 getting involved in the planning for a new Cedar Rapids courthouse. Well, there was other more experienced judges that were far more responsible for that project. I had kind of a bit part, and yet I attended all of the meetings in the Cedar Rapids courthouse, and I learned how enjoyable it is to work with architects. As lawyers, we everything we do is fairly linear. We file a complaint, we go to discovery, we have motion practice, we have a trial, we have an appeal. It's all linear, but the architects look at a problem from every which direction at one time. And so just being a part of that process was very exciting. I learned a lot as a part of that Cedar Rapids courthouse construction project. And then finally, as the United States District Judge in the Southern District of Iowa, on about a week's notice, I learned that Des Moines is getting a new courthouse. And that was December of 2015, and off to the races that we've gone. Again, a fascinating project, a fascinating discipline, and the process of assisting in the creation of something that has to be functional for the next 75 years is both exciting and daunting. Who knows what the technology is going to be like 10 years from now? And that was a significant problem in the Cedar Rapids project. We just don't, technology is changing so fast right now that we don't know what this building needs to accommodate in the future. Anyway, there's hundreds of problems like that need to be solved, and the collaboration between the artistic people and the people that will operate the building is very, very exciting. So in December of this year, we will dedicate the new Council Bluffs Courthouse, yet another project And then in February of 2023, our Des Moines courthouse will be occupied for the next, hopefully, 75 to 100 years.
Between your time as a magistrate judge and a U.S. District Court judge, you've been a judge for a little over 34 years at this point. Why are you retiring now?
There's a season for everything. And I just feel like this season's over for me. It's not because I haven't loved it. I've loved every single day at work. But I think it's time for something new. 34 years as a judge, 4,000 people sentenced. I just feel like it's time for something new. I said earlier that I found the mediation to be so rewarding. There's other projects that I'm thinking about that have just totally energized me again. And so I'm just excited about the future. Loved every day as a judge, but excited to do something new.
Just a couple final questions. Number one, who are you outside of being a judge?
Husband, father of 3 great boys, slightly above average golfer, way above average pheasant hunter, and friend to many.
Number two is, how do you want to be remembered?
Federal judges really aren't remembered very long. If you look at the last generation of federal judges who have retired, it's not very long after you're really not well remembered, or only remembered by a few people. I have no desire to leave anything behind. I want my children to remember me. I want my law clerks to remember me fondly. But beyond that, I never published many opinions, and I never really thought about leaving something behind in the profession. For me, it was always the most important thing is to be in the moment. Like in the moment, as best as I could possibly be right then and there for the people who were in front of me right then and there. After that, nothing else really registered. So it doesn't matter to me how I'm remembered except by my law clerks and my children.
Well, thank you again for sitting down and allowing me to be a part of this oral history. Again, it was a true pleasure and a true honor. Thanks,
Thank you
Dad.
for doing it, Matthew.
Thanks.
This is wonderful.
It is.